Welcome to another edition of Fire Facts. Chiefs Lellis and Smith keep warm sitting by the fireplace, and remembering earlier days in Marin. Today their thoughts lead them to recall the early days of Greenbrae and its fire department. Let's listen.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Marin County Fire Chief's historical website. And today with Chief Smith, we'll be discussing the history of Greenbrae and how the fire protection came about that is now in service, serving through Kentfield and Larkspur. So if we could, Bambi, if we could have the first slide, please. Here is an aerial view, of course, of the Sir Francis Drake at what we now know as 101. And you can see the only buildings of any consequence, the Greenbrae Dairy, sometimes called the ranch. And at the lower left, you'll see the Corte Madera Creek, how it meanders here and there. And what is right in the middle at the lower part of is a hill with trees on it. And Larkspur Station 2, 15, 16, will be right at the base of that hill in another 50 to 60 years. So you can see that there was very little in the Greenbrae area. And from Sir Francis Drake, the main road that we see, all the way down to Corte Madera Ave, was all tidal action. There was very little, if any, buildings other than maybe the boardwalk, Greenbrae boardwalk. And if you look at along the island, next to the creek, you'll see a series of arcs. Arcs were basically homes that were brought in on a high tide and then offloaded off from the creek and set down on the ground. And we had boardwalks from San Quentin all the way up into Kentfield. So that's kind of what's going on right now at this time of this, let's say this is the turn of the century going into the 1900s, okay? So anyway, Paul, any comments on this one?
Yeah, that's an amazing shot. So, Bill, I think you're correct. There was a big ranch over there, that dairy ranch, on the aerial view that you see. So correct me here, or I think I'm right. To the right of our screen would be San Quentin Prison, and that was really the only institutional edifice there back at that time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There was probably the Hutchison Quarry and the Remoulade Brickyard. Other than that, in the Greenbrae Rod and Gun Club. The
Okay.
Rod and Gun Club was probably the emphasis of getting some type of fire protection in the future. That was a very, very popular place to be a member of. So
Nice.
Yeah. Bambi, can we have the next slide, please?
And what do we have here, Bill?
We have again another view of the ranch, more dedicated to how the ranch looked probably in the 1950s. This is probably in the 1920s. This photo was taken, and you can see where the ranch comes right down to what would probably be Elise Hill Drive today, where the ranch is. And at the bottom, where Sir Francis Drake is, you can see a couple above ground water tanks. They were pumped up to the ranch. And on the far lower right-hand side of 101, you can start to see some of the arcs, the Greenbrae Boardwalk, which is 99% in the county area. The fire service that was still in the county. And maybe only 2 arcs were really in Larkspur. And the Rod and Gun Club. And then, as you said, on further to the right would be the Brickyards and the San Quentin Prison. But that's all that was out there way up until probably the 40s, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's a great shot. If you look in the background, you can see the City of San Rafael buildings. Those little white look like little white specks from this view. You can see over the Greenbrae Hill into San Rafael. But for a guy that lived in Greenbrae for 10 years and look at this old picture without the apartments and without the homes and without the shopping center, What a piece of history you found here, Bill.
Yeah, I can. I remember when I came on board in Larkspur in the late '50s. They used to tell me it wasn't that many years before they had burnt the ranch down. The ranch had given up ranching and dairying, and the buildings just sat there. And the Schultz Building Company asked the fire department, probably both Kentfield and Larkspur, and they had probably what you and I would call a control burn.
Sure.
Burnt the buildings down for stuff, but there was
Sure.
no water at this time. I would imagine any fire protection came from the county out of Marin City. That's what my guess would be at this time.
Yeah, because before Kenfield came to be in 1922, that was all county area,
Yep.
and then everything east of what was Highway 101, Sir Francis Drake interchange, like you mentioned, the brickyard and the quarry and the town of the little village of San Quentin, that was all county area,
Now,
all unincorporated.
what you're looking at probably is that the 635 acres that the Schultz Building Company bought from the San Francisco Archdiocese. Well, we don't know how much money, but that occurred in 1946.
Mm-hmm.
Schultz Building Company built a lot of homes in the peninsula. Came up to Marin County and bought this property, and has since that's been their headquarters since 1946.
Yep.
I will say, in my dealings with the Schultz Building Company was excellent. They were just they would do anything for you. I mean, as far as fire protection and so forth, building the apartments and the single family homes. But that's what it looked like, probably 1920s. What we're looking at right now, sometime. Yeah.
Yep.
Bambi, next slide, please.
Oh, there's the arcs you mentioned, Bill.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about those and how far up the
Sure. These arcs, this is the Corte Madera Creek, and we're looking westbound from this view towards Mount Tam. And these arcs were popular all the way up to Ross Landing. Now, Ross Landing is where the College of Marin starts today at what's today College Avenue and Sir Francis Drake. It was called Ross Landing Road back then. It was the main thoroughfare. That being said, they had arcs all the way up and down the creek. And I was doing some research for our little article today, Bill, and in 1931, the fire chief of the Greenbrae Volunteer Fire Company, at a meeting of the Marin County Association of Fire Departments, spoke about the 74, 75 arcs on that creek and the lack of fire protection and the danger they posed. If one got on fire, they were all going to go. There was no hydrant system there. There was no real access there. There was no roadway there. So it was quite a challenge for the firefighters. And remember, these are all volunteer fire companies back in.
Yeah, the one thing right now in the county, the only two boardwalks that we had in Larkspur, we had the Greenbrae Boardwalk, and then we had Boardwalk 1, 2, 3, and 4 that went all the way up to the college. And when the engineering corps came in to straighten out and clean up the creek, Corte Madera Creek, took out all 2, 3, and 4 boardwalks and filled what is now from Safe Bon Air Road into Doherty Drive. That's when they were dredging the creek. That's where that landfill came from to build Safeway at Bon Air Road all the way up to the police station on Twin Cities Police Station on Doherty Drive. And it was quite a lifestyle to live on one of these arcs. And the only one now is the Larkspur Boardwalk 1, which is a historical landmark now in Larkspur. And the one thing about both Greenbrae and Larkspur's Boardwalk, they had an 1.5-inch standpipe system when I came on board in the 50s. And it was all the old, and I still is, the old Pacific Coast threads you wanted to fight a fire out on the boardwalk, you had to bring some couplings with you that went from Pacific Coast thread to 1.5-inch national standard thread. And I'm guessing today it's probably still the same. The old standpipe system is still there, but I'm sure that they have a better fire protection going out to those boardwalks. But
Yeah. You see, Bill, when you were the fire chief and I was on the engine company in Kentfield, we had some training sessions out there, and as I recall, we had like a cart.
Yeah.
That we'd put our hose and equipment in to roll it out there.
Yeah, we would have shopping carts from Alpha Beta Shopping Center, little red carts. Anything we could put our gear into, we would take it out there. My very last call, the last day I worked as chief, we had a fire on Boardwalk 1.
Mm-hmm.
Eric came in and so forth. But I always thought about my last incident as a fire chief was on Boardwalk 1, and then watching the guys have to haul everything out there, hose, everything. You know,
right?
It's quite a unique place to fight a fire.
I'll tell you, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about how that fire protection started.
Yeah.
In our discussion today.
Bambi, next slide, please.
Now, this, Bill, I recognize this. This is where Highway 101 is today in the north-south direction, and you can see that car making a left-hand turn from the northbound lanes, making a left onto Sir Francis Drake. And I know we can't read it in this picture, but that big billboard on the hill there has an arrow, and it says, Kentfield, San Anselmo, Point Reyes.
Yeah.
And that was a picture of the transportation system. And like I mentioned to you before, Bill, look at the hill. Today it's just that whole area is so developed with nice homes. And back then it was just a pasture for the cows. And I'm not sure if you can see it in this photograph, but above that vehicle making the left-hand turn, you can see some cows up there grazing on the hillside.
Yeah, it's quite. And the one thing people forget, until late into the 60s, that was a wooden bridge that went over the Corvinera Creek. And on a Sunday afternoon when traffic was visiting the Bay Area, it's just standing there waiting for the light to change. The bridge would catch fire because it was made out of wood, and we'd have to go out and put the fire out on the bridge. That's before the overpass was put in. So
sure.
So we're going way back. There was stoplights at all Corvinera Ave, Sir Francis Drake, all stoplights. It was
right.
The freeway off ramp at this time.
Right.
I hasn't signed that bill yet for freeway system in America. Yeah. So Bambi, next slide, please. Now, this is the only evidence that I am aware of, other than the articles in the newspaper, that there was a Greenbrae volunteer fire department. This badge happens to come from the Larkspur Historical Museum, and that's the only one we got. It's a wallet badge. It's not a breast badge. And so, but it's the only piece of information that we can find. I think both of us been researching this.
Mm-hmm.
It says there was a volunteer Greenbrae Volunteer Fire Department, and I'm assuming it was at the dairy. Whatever they had for hose carts or a hand pump or whatever they had was probably at the dairy, and they had to respond. And I can't imagine there weren't a lot of homes there, so I don't know how big the department was. Never knew.
You mentioned this before, Bill. I think because of the Rod and Gun Club and because of the ARCs, the dairy would be the logical place.
Right.
And with the research you did is really, really good. And you're right. The only piece of physical evidence that we have that says there was a Greenbrae a volunteer fire company, besides the articles in the paper, we'll talk about that in a bit. But that's really the only piece of physical evidence left, isn't it? And maybe you can talk a little bit about this. If you look at that badge, Greenbrae is 2 words.
Yes.
And today it's all one word. You know, when I moved there in the 70s, it was Greenbrae, one word. So what did you find out about, this notation here?
Well, the word "bray" is a off the Scottish accent, Northern Ireland accent. It means hill, hilly. So Greenbrae, when they first settled it, was a green hills, basically what it was. And I'm sure that the Schultz company, when they were developing it, was probably easier to bring the two words together, make it one word, as versus Greenbrae, like that's on the badge.
Mhm.
I did all the I called every badge company in America, hoping I could find the ones that may have made that badge, but come up empty-handed. So, but
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting story about the Scottish dialect, meaning hilly, Greenbrae hills. So and they were hills. They were hills, Bonnier Hill, Greenbrae Hills. So there were a lot of hills out there, still out there. Yeah,
Yeah, it was aptly named. It really was.
yeah,
Which kind of brings us to where we are today.
yeah.
The Greenbrae badge and the research that you did on that badge, thank you. Um, Bill and I found a couple of articles in the old Sausalito paper and the San Anselmo Herald. What the newspaper article said, they reported on this um, Firemen's Association back then, started in the 1920s here in Marin. It was called the Marin Association of Fire Departments. And they were probably 20, less than that, a half a dozen. It started out with a half a dozen, and maybe it got to 12 or 14 departments. And this fella, P.L. Miller, keeps coming up as the chief of the Greenbrae Volunteer Fire Department.
Right.
And I did some research in the 1930s and the 1940s US censuses to try to find more about this fellow Miller and where he lived and if he had family and if he was tied to, anybody we knew currently. And again, like you with your badge, Bill, I kept running into dead ends.
So I'm hoping that someone watching this program will maybe show some light on that. Like you were saying, one of the firemen who was killed in the Mar Vista fire in San Rafael was
Right.
a, and it kind of makes sense that a firefighter from Greenbrae was the chief, that maybe his son rotated to become a chief after World War II, so with the name Miller. But that's just conjecture on our part, how that worked. So if anyone
Right.
has the information, yeah,
Right. Now, the Miller that was killed in San Rafael in the Del Mar fire, his father had a different name than P.L. Miller, but it could have been a cousin or an uncle. We just don't know. The records are really thin. But something else that we discovered doing this research with the Greenbrae Fire Department in the minutes of the Association of Marin County Fire Departments was one of the members was Northwest Pacific Railroad,
yes,
Tiburon,
right,
and that was this member's fire department was uh, Northwest Pacific Railroad Company out of Tiburon, and we're going to follow up later this year with the Tiburon piece. Um, but I'll tell you, this was before the Tiburon Fire District existed.
right, yes.
So the little bits and pieces of information we're finding with the Greenbrae Fire Department are going to lead into our story later this year with Tiburon.
Yeah. Um, the just a little highlight to the Marin County fire departments. Um, I had the honor of serving as their president one year when I was assistant chief with Larkspur, and it was the most popular meeting was on December in Woodacre. They would have a crab feed. Hundreds of guys show up to that crab feed in Woodacre, and but the association, just like everything else, as time moved on, the association kind of dissolved itself, and we had the Marin County fire chiefs and the training officers and the prevention officers take their place, and the volunteers were kind of left out a little bit as time moved on.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
But,
Okay, well, why don't we roll into modern fire protection? What happened after World War II? Because you and I both know that Greenbrae was the dairy in some fields and a couple of homes. Um, and then after World War II, we had this huge development, as you mentioned, the Schultz Company in the Greenbrae Fire Station today, which is your background here. Maybe we should talk a little bit about that.
yeah, what was happening as the Schultz Foundation was beginning to build up in the 50s, and that's when they burnt the dairy down. They were building homes. The Bonaire Hill, where all the apartments are, was probably one of the last phases of construction. I mean, that they went after. They were building single family homes at 1st.
Mhm.
And Mr. Miller appears in 1931, and he goes all the way up to 1952 in an article about the fire protection in the boardwalk, the Greenbrae Boardwalk. So he was probably a member or an officer in the Greenbrae Boardwalk Association. And so he spans like almost 30 years. He's in the area. So that makes me believe he was with the dairy. I can't think of any other business or person who would be that long in that rural area. So in the 1950s, there was a need for fire protection. Either Kenfield or Larkspur, somebody was going to have to protect these new homes that were being built. And Marin General Hospital is on the drawing board in like 52 or 54. Bonaire Road is not even in yet. And keep in mind, when I tell you this story, you know it. And people can say, wow, when we had a fire in Greenbrae, the Larkspur part of Greenbrae, we had to leave Larkspur downtown, 420 Magnolia Ave, go up past the Kenfield Fire Department, take a right on Sir Francis Drake, and drive all the way out to Greenbrae. There was no service out there then. And we had no radios to tell you that we were responding. We would have to call you, someone would have to stay back at the station and call Kenfield on your hotline. Remember, in those days, we all had our own basic 911 phone stickers. And we would have to call you and say, we're responding to a call. And most of the time we needed mutual aid. And you guys would respond behind us. But we would go right by your station. Bonaire Road, the bridge was built first. And they had to lower Magnolia Ave at Bonaire because there was a big hill there. The cut is still visible. And they took them, after the bridge was built, it took them 3 or 4 years to build the road. So we couldn't get the Marin Journal. You guys were first in the Marin Journal. That's why you were first in, basically surrounded by Larkspur, because you guys were the closest when they built the building. And the volunteers honestly told the hospital, we can't protect you without a road to the bridge. And that's why Kenfield took over the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Most cases, if the road was in, it would have been in Larkspur. But thank goodness you guys had all the problems with the hospital. We didn't have to deal with it. So in the 50s, in 1960, Neil Schultz and his son, Neil Schultz Jr., donated a piece of land, which now sits where station 16 is. Is that the right number? 16, behind the Shell station. And it was titled, and right between the Shell station and the station itself was the main tributary to Coromandel Creek. Basically, all of the Greenbrae Hill drained from that side, drained down past and went past Station 2, made a 90-degree turn at the foot of that hill, which was only like 20 feet away from the station, and went out to the main creek. And so he gave us the property. The city come up with the money to build the station. It was only like $42,000 or something to build it. It was a 4-bay station. It was only going to be designed for 1 or 2 personnel, 24 hours. Had a 4-bay. It didn't have a workshop. It just had a workbench, and then a 6-bed open dormitory, very small kitchen. Nobody was supposed to be working there, more than a couple of guys, and a small TV room. and next to our building was what I like to call the Greenbrae Yacht Club. It was the little skiffs that the people from Greenbrae Bon Air kept in a fence, and the high tide they could launch and go sailing and come back. It was right next to, which is now the park,
Right.
dedicated to Jim Niven. Now we can talk about that later. So when they're going to build the firehouse, it was a big beam, and you can see from the photos, there's a big beam. A funny thing happened. On the plans, they showed the driveway, the apparatus ramp, but it wasn't in the specs. The contractor didn't have to put in the apparatus ramp. The firemen had to do that with Public Works. So, and that took us. Couldn't park a rig in the station for over like 45 days to let the concrete cure. So we opened it, but the squad that you see behind me on the image behind me, that was the first piece of apparatus that served the Greenbrae area.
That's cool.
Yeah. So next slide, Tammy.
Bambi.
I said,